Hey everyone and welcome back. In this video tutorial I'm going to show you how to extend the back panel of your hexagon cardigan. So when you started your hexagon cardigan you took a measurement called your body measurement, and that was the circumference of the widest part of your body. So for some that's the bust, others it's the hips, maybe the waist, your butt, depends how long you want the cardigan to be. For this part of the tutorial, you need to know what that circumference measurement was. What we're going to do with that measurement is half it, because half of that circumference is the width that your cardigan needs to be when it is laid flat. So for instance, if your measurement was 40 inches, your flat laid cardigan needs to measure 20 inches from one armpit to the other. Excuse my upside down tape, I'm just showing you what I mean. So each half of your cardigan is each made up of one of the hexagons. So one hexagon, when folded into your cardigan shape, needs to measure one half of your half measurement, a quarter of your total circumference. So this is a cardigan for my daughter and it's just over 6 inches. So when I've updated this panel, it will be 12 inches in total across. Does that make sense? It's all written down in the pattern. If you need any extra help, obviously just contact me. So I'm going to be taking this panel, which is just our hexagon that we've seamed the shoulder seam, and turning it into one that looks more like this, which has got the extension onto that back panel, so it's ready for joining in the back. Just going to move this one to the side for now. Okay, so what we need to do to begin, I'm starting on the right side of my cardigan, and I'm going to take my yarn, my hook, and I'm going to join that to the bottom chain of the back of my panel. So, I'm just going to pop that in here, just poke it through, grab your working yarn and pull it up. I'm going to tie this on like usual. Don't come at me for this method, this is how I've always done it, works just great. And then put your hook back through the same loop, pull up your working yarn. Okay, so now you've done that, we are going to flip the hexagon. So it's really difficult to work with it like this behind, and I want my stitches to be the right way round, not upside down. So what I like to do is take my cardigan and flip it over so that you can keep your hook in your right hand, and you are now going to be working along this panel. So you've got your shoulder seam down the side, this is the back, and we're going to be working along here. So to begin, we are going to chain 2. So that's 2, and this counts as your first stitch in the row. So all we're going to do from this point on is a double crochet in each of these chains all the way along the row until we come to the stitch before our shoulder seam, so just here. So I'm going to start that now. So you should already be very familiar with the double crochet because that's what we've done for the rest of this cardigan. But just as a recap, you're going to yarn over, put your hook into your next chain, grab your yarn and pull it through, and yarn over again and pull it through 2, yarn over through 2, and there's the first stitch. We're going to keep that up, so we're going to go to the next chain. Another double crochet, and just keep on going all the way along. So I may speed this up. Okay, so we're going to keep doing that all the way along this row, and I'm going to meet you back when we get to the end, okay? Okay, I'm back. So just like I said, I've almost come to the end of my row here. I've got 2 stitches left. I'm going to do those with you now. So here's the first one. And one more. I tend to go either straight into this big hole, or if you can, take it just into the chain. There we go. And there's the first row of your back extensions. So for mine, I need to do 3 rows to make mine up to where I need to be. If you don't know how many rows you need to do, just measure after every one, and it's better to go a smidge bigger than a smidge smaller, just to make sure you've definitely got the good fit. So to turn, we're going to turn our row here. We're going to chain 2, and then we're going to flip your cardigan so that you're once again in the right hand corner, and you're now looking at the inside of your cardigan, the wrong side. And we're going to, just the same as before, we're going to do a whole row of double crochet, 1 in each chain. And what you do is you'll be adding a few centimetres onto your back panel every single time you add a row. So I'm going to go ahead now and do the rest of this row and the next row, and I'll show you how we finish that off in just a minute. Okay, here I am. I've got 2 stitches left of my last row. That's the 3rd row of this back extension for me. So I'm just going to do a double here and 1 more double in the top of the stitch. And then I'm going to chain 1, pull that through, and I'm just going to snip the ends. And there you have your back extension for the left panel. See that? So just a note, when you're working on the left panel, you actually start from a different place. So on the right hand panel, you start in the bottom corner of your back. But because obviously the other side is reversed, you are going to be starting in the top back corner. So what you do is you would take your hook, you would start your work here, just beneath the shoulder back panel. And then when you flip your work round, you're starting from here and you're working across the row from right to left. And that's just so that the stitches are the same way around, because if you'd started at the bottom, like you do for the other one, you would have this row as the wrong side of the stitch. And it doesn't make a huge difference because they're quite similar, the back and front of double crochet. But if you really want to make sure that it's perfect, then I suggest you start at the top. And that's all written down in the pattern as well. So that is how you do your back extensions. Later on in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to extend the bottom of your cardigan. And there's a different video to show you how to take your sleeves from this to this. So yeah, I'll see you again soon. Okay, so we've been very busy and I have now joined the 2 panels of my cardigan. My 2 hexagons are now 1 cardigan. And it's time to extend the bottom layer of my cardigan. So I want this cardigan to be a little bit longer, not a lot, just a smidge. So I'm going to show you how to do the length extensions now. So with your hook, you want to find the bottom stitch on the right hand side of your cardigan as it is facing you, right side up. So that for me is just here. You're going to pop your hook in. And then with your yarn, you're going to join your yarn in and pull up a working loop. So just before, like we did for the back panel, we're now basically doing the same thing, but on the end of our jumper or cardigan. So pull up your working yarn, tie that in, put your hook back through and pull up a working loop. Okay, so what I like to do at this point, because I think it makes it much easier to do, is to pick up my cardigan and flip it this way round so that I'm working, oh, lost my stitch there, I'm working from right to left, and it's the right side of my stitches, because you can do it the other way, but what that does is it makes your stitches backwards, and I like to see them from the front. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 2. And that's going to count as our first stitch in this row. So just like before, we are going to go all the way around this row, all the way along this row even, until we get to the other side in double crochet. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So we're going to yarn over, and we are going to work in each of our chains. So the chain for my stitch here is really tight, so I'm just going to work straight into that big loop, into that chain space. You won't be able to tell when we get going. So I'm going to carry on. I'm going to keep going. So this is the easy bit. So you work like this until you come round to the back of your cardigan. And when you're at the back of your cardigan, when you're getting near the centre, you'll notice that you have got some slightly different stitches. And I'm going to get there and then I'll show you what I mean. So carry on doing this until you get to this back corner of your work, and I'll meet you back there. Okay, so I've now got to the end of my original hexagon, and you know that because you've come to the point where you're in the stitch at the end of this sort of loop pattern. And what you've got next is where you did your back extensions, your join seam, and then the next set of extensions before you get back into your normal hexagon. Now these stitches are slightly different to work into than the regular hexagon, and that is because the regular hexagon has nice easy chains to work into at the end of each row because of the way they are made. However, these stitches are actually on their side, so you're working into what is effectively the posts of the stitches, and that means they're not quite the same distance apart from each other and they're not quite the same shape or size. So what we want to make sure we do here is that we get a nice even spread of stitches and that your work continues to lay flat when you get to this point. Because if you add too many stitches, you might add in a bit of a ripple here, and if you add in too few, you'll have what's known as a pucker, where it pulls your work together. So I'm going to do that with you now. And it doesn't matter how many you do in this part, just so long as it looks and feels the same sort of texture. There's no puckers, there's no ripples. So don't get too hung up on making sure everything's even and matched. Just make sure that it feels right. So I'm going to do a double. I'm going to put my first double in this space here. I'm going to put my next one into this one. So that one was fairly straightforward. Now this one is obviously quite a big stitch. So I am going to put my hook straight into this piece, straight into the whole lot. Yeah. And then I'm also going to put a stitch here, which is obviously quite close, but I think that will even out the fact that the last one went into a wider stitch. You see that? So we're still lying nice and flat. I'm going to do one more here. Make sure you're at least under 2 pieces of yarn. And then we've come to our center seam. So on the center seam, I like to work straight into the center of the last chain stitch. Again, with the double crochet, it can take a bit of a wiggle because sometimes it's a bit tight. I'm going to grab my yarn and pull it back through. That's it. And then do my double. Okay, so we're now halfway there. As you can see, it's still sitting nice and flat and it looks even and nicely spaced across the whole lot. So now what we're going to do is going to replicate it on this side. So just for maths, for the maths bods out there, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches before we got to that center. So we may have 5 stitches on this side, we may have more, we may have less. So let's see what we get now, okay? I'm going to go in here. And we're going to go straight into this big one. So that's 2. 3. 4. There's 5. So that's 5, that takes us to even, but I'm actually going to put one additional stitch in because I've got this space here before I get to the centre of this pattern on the other side. So like I say, it doesn't have to be perfectly even in terms of your stitch count, but what it does have to do is not have too many big spaces, not have too many crushed together, and to lay flat and smooth when you sit out. Because what that is, that's the back of your jumper, your cardigan, and you don't want there to be a pull or there to be like a ripple here. You want that to sit nice and smooth and flush with your back. So there you have those stitches. We're now going to put one straight into this big chain space, and then that takes us nicely back to our regular chain stitches all along this row, and we're going to carry on as before. So this is the only row you have to do that little tricky bit on, because from this point on the row that you've just made has all got chain stitches on, so you just go into each of those stitches from now on. So that's the hardest bit all finished with. So I'm going to carry on now. I'm going to get to the end of this row and I'll meet you back there. Okay, welcome back. So I'm almost at the end of this row now. I'm just going to do the last couple of stitches. So there's my last chain. I'm actually going to finish off by doing one in the big chain space, just to make sure we're nice and level. Okay, so that's the end of the first row. I've added one row of double crochets to the whole bottom edge of my cardigan, and I'm going to now go in and do another row. So what I want to do is I'm going to chain 2, and that's the first stitch of our next row. But what we need to do now is turn our work. So we're going to flip this over just like before when we did the back extensions, and we're going to work from right to left, back all the way along this row. And like I said, it should be nice and easy now. You've done the complicated bit, you've just got to go all the way to the end. So let's do that. So just a reminder, when you're doing these, you're going to skip that first chain space because that is the chain for this first post. So we're going to yarn over, pop it in there. So if you had gone into that, what that starts to do is it starts to make your rows get bigger and bigger every time. It adds a stitch to the beginning every time. So you want to just make sure you miss that to keep it nice and square. I'm going to carry on along here now. And I am going to carry on here and I'll meet you back at the end of the row because it's going to be the last row that I do here. Okay, I have just come to the end of my second row of length extensions. I've got one stitch more to do, so I'm going to do that now. So I have done 2 rows. You can obviously do as many as you need to do to make sure that the length of your cardigan is the length that you want it to be. So I'm going to do a chain now just to finish that off. Do your chain, pull it nice and tight, and we're going to snip that off. So what I would say is when you're doing this part of your cardigan, I would finish your extensions with about an inch more to go to make it the desired finished length. So what I mean by that is, oh, excuse me, there's something flying past, I think, strange noise going on, is when your cardigan is like this, from this point to this point, it should measure 1 inch less than your final desired length. And that is because we are going to be putting an edging around this cardigan. It's going to be about 1 inch deep. So that will add an additional inch to your finished garment. But there you have your, so far, perfect little cardigan. So all we've got left to do now is to turn this sleeve into this sleeve. Okay, welcome back. We are now in one of the last steps, really. We are in how to turn this unfinished sleeve into this nice long balloon sleeve. So we're going to start with the sleeve extensions. For that, you're going to need your yarn and your hook. And we are going to start by finding the bottom centre of your sleeve. So if I just move this along. That would be the opposite side to your seam, so it's down here. And all we're going to do is we're going to get our cuff, find our centre stitch and poke our hook through. Then you're going to need your yarn. We're going to pull that through, tie it on like we have done for the rest of the project. pop our hook back through the same loop and pull up a working loop. So you're now ready to start your sleeve extensions. So for this sleeve, I've already done my other sleeve, and I did that while my daughter was in the room, so I know the length I want to do for that. If you are going from measurements, what I suggest you do is you put your cardigan on, and where your shoulder comes, it's probably around here, pop a stitch marker in the top of your shoulder, where your shoulder sits, and that's the point where you're going to measure your sleeve from. And what you want to do is you're going to add rows onto the sleeve until it measures 1 inch less, or 2 inches less even, than your sleeve measurement that you took right at the beginning of this project. So we stop at 2 inches before, because the cuff that we put on has some stitches in that are there to reduce the width of the sleeve, and then the cuff, and that adds 2 inches to the sleeve length. So anyway, back to our unfinished sleeve. We have pulled up a working loop, and we are now ready to begin our sleeve extension. So I have 5 rows to add to this. So we're going to start by chaining 2. Okay, and all we're going to do is we are going to do a double crochet in each of these chains all the way around the sleeve until you come back to this one. Once you've done this one, we're going to slip stitch to join to your first post, chain 2 and start again. So I'm going to show you that now. So I'm going to start with a double. Okay, so we're just going to carry on like that all the way around. I'm going to meet you back when I am about to put this last stitch in, so I can show you how we do the slip stitch join. So when you get to that point, come back to me. Okay, so I've now been round my sleeve almost the whole way. I've got 1 stitch left just here, and then I'll be joining up to my original chain 2. So it's yarn over into that last stitch for your double. And then we're just going to slip stitch to join, and all we have to do for this is put your hook between the first and second post, just in the big hole, pull your yarn through and pull that under your working loop, and that is your completed round. So depending on how much you've got to do for this, you're probably going to need to do a few more rows. I need to do 4 more rows, so I am going to go ahead and do that. Each row is worked exactly the same, chain 2 and then 2, and then a double crochet in each of these chains all the way around to a slip stitch join. I'll meet you back here when it's time to do the cuff.